September 24th, 1991. 3 records ship in America on the same day. 2 of them rewire rock music. Nirvana's Nevermind. The Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magic. Both detonate. The third one barely makes a sound that week. A few kids from Queens, on a label most people are not watching, put out their second album. No explosion, no riot. But that third record decided something the other 2 did not. It decided where hip-hop was going to live. Not up top, in the noise. Down at the bottom, in the bass, in the low end. This is the story of the album that built the future of rap on its quietest frequency. When it dropped, A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory. A Tribe Called Quest formed in Queens, New York in 1985. 3 voices carry this record. Q-Tip, the MC and the lead producer, the architect. Phife Dawg, born Malik Taylor, the other MC, and Ali Shaheed Muhammad, the DJ and co-producer. A founding member, Jerobi White, had stepped away from the group by these sessions. Their first album, in 1990, was bright, busy, colorful, full of ideas. The Low End Theory, released September 24th, 1991 on Jive Records, is the opposite. It is stripped down to almost nothing. Drums, a rapper, and bass. Start with the name, because the name is the whole thesis. The low end is the bottom of the sound, the bass frequencies, the part of the music you feel in your chest before you hear it. The band built the entire record down there on purpose, but the title means more than the equipment. The phrase points 2 ways at once. It points to the bass, and it points to where Black people lived in America in 1991. At the lower end of the country, at the bottom of how the place was structured, the bottom of the music and the bottom of the country, living inside the same 2 words. The bass is not only a sound on this album, it is an argument. Put the first album and this one side by side, and the difference hits you immediately. The 1990 record is crowded, samples stacked on samples. The Low End Theory clears the room. On most of these songs, there are 3 things and only 3 things. A drum break, a bass line, and a voice. That was a risk. In 1991, a lot of rap was getting louder and denser. Public Enemy was building walls of noise. The West Coast was getting harder and more cinematic. Tribe went the other way. They turned almost everything off and turned the bass up. And when you take everything else away, 2 things have nowhere to hide: the rapping and the bottom end. Every word has to land. Every bass note has to be the right one. There is no wall of sound to cover a weak bar or a lazy groove. This is why people who do not even like rap end up loving this record. It breathes. It swings. It sounds less like a typical 1991 rap album and more like a small jazz group that happens to have 2 MCs. Bass, drums, voice, and space. That was the whole design. And the musician they brought in to prove the point was not a rapper at all. Here is the moment the thesis becomes literal. On a song called Verses from the Abstract, the bass you are hearing is not a sample. It is not a loop pulled off an old record. It is a man playing live in the room. That man is Ron Carter. If you do not know jazz, here is what you need to know. Ron Carter is one of the most recorded bassists in the history of the music. In the 1960s, he played in Miles Davis's band, in a rhythm section a lot of people will tell you is the greatest ever assembled. By 1991, he is a living legend, a giant of an art form older than rock and roll. And a group of kids in their early 20s making a rap album called him. And he came. Q-Tip explained it simply. "We wanted that straight bass sound," he said. And Ron Carter is one of the premier bassists of the century. Sit with what that is. A jazz master from the generation of Miles Davis, walking into a hip-hop session, playing the low end for young men who grew up on his music without always knowing his name. The bass on Verses from the Abstract is the literal sound of one tradition handing the bottom of the music to the next one. The album is called The Low End Theory. On that song, the low end is Ron Carter. That is not a metaphor, that is just what happened on the tape. Where did this come from? Why jazz? Why these kids? Why now? Tribe were part of a loose family of New York groups called the Native Tongues, De La Soul, the Jungle Brothers, groups that rapped about ideas and history and being young and curious, instead of only about the street. They treated black music as one long family tree, and they went digging in it. That digging is all over this record. The drums come from old soul and funk and jazz sessions. The bass lines are lifted from records most of their listeners had never heard. The opening track, Excursions, is built on a piece by Art Blakey, one of the great jazz drummers, a band leader who spent decades pushing young players forward. A young group reaching back to an elder who spent his whole life doing exactly that. But notice what they did not do. They did not just sprinkle a little jazz on top of rap to seem smart. They took the actual architecture of jazz, the feel of it, the space in it, the way an upright bass and a drummer breathe together, and they built rap out of that. They are often credited with defining jazz rap as a sound, not inventing it. Others touched it first, but this is the record that turned it into a language other people could speak. Every record has hands that shape it. This one had two sets that matter most. The first belongs to Q-Tip. He is the architect. He chose the samples, built the beats, set the minimalist rule, and held the whole concept together. The smooth voice, the calm center, the one with the plan. The second set of hands almost was not on the record at all. Phife Dawg, Malik Taylor, grew up with Q-Tip. They met as small children in Queens. But on the first Tribe album, Phife was barely there. A few verses. A side character in his own group. He was young, he was unsure, and around that time his life got harder in a way the public did not see yet. He had been diagnosed with diabetes, a disease he would fight for the rest of his life. So when it came time to make the low-end theory, it was not a sure thing that Phife would step up. He told the story later. He ran into Q-Tip on the train, leaving Queens, heading into Manhattan, and Q-Tip told him, in Phife's own words, "I want you on a couple of songs, but you have to take it serious." He took it serious. The Phife Dawg on this album is a different person. He calls himself the 5-foot assassin. He is funny, fast, sharp, full of sports and sneakers and bite. He is the rough voice against Q-Tip's smooth one. And that contrast, those two textures trading lines, is the actual sound of this group at its best. The album that Phife almost was not on became the album where Phife arrived. The record ends on its loudest moment, and it is worth stopping there. The last song is called Scenario. It is a posse cut, a track where the crew trades verses and tries to take each other's heads off. And on it, a young, almost unknown rapper steps to the microphone and detonates. His name is Busta Rhymes. The verse he delivers on Scenario, all energy and roar, is one of the most famous guest verses in the history of rap. People who cannot name a single other song on this album can still quote it. It launched his entire career. So look at the shape of this thing. It opens on Art Blakey and a jazz bass line. It spends most of its time stripped down and cool and low, and then it throws the doors open and introduces the next star on the way out, calm and deep and controlled for 13 songs. And then Scenario lets the energy off the leash. Now step back from the record and look at the world it landed in. The fall of 1991 is one of the loudest seasons in modern culture. Start with that same release day, September 24th. Tribe was not the only act shipping a classic. Nirvana's Nevermind came out the exact same day, and by the chart dated January 11th, 1992, it was the #1 album in the country, and rock had changed for a decade. The Red Hot Chili Peppers put out Blood Sugar Sex Magic that same day too. 3 records, 1 day, all 3 now called classics. And rap itself was standing at a fork. Earlier that year, NWA's second album became the first gangsta rap record to hit #1 in America. The West Coast was getting harder, angrier, more cinematic. Against all of that, Tribe and the Native Tongues were making something cooler and more bookish. The same music pulling in 2 directions at once. It was a heavy year to be young and black in America. On March 3rd, 1991, a man named Rodney King was beaten by police officers in Los Angeles, and a bystander caught it on tape. That tape played all year. The fire it would set did not fully catch until the spring of 1992, but the tension is already in the air this record breathes. And the ground was shifting under the music business too. On December 17th, 1991, less than 3 months after this album came out, a federal judge ruled on sampling. He opened his decision with 4 words: "Thou shalt not steal." Almost overnight, building a record out of other people's records, the exact craft this album is made of, became a legal and financial minefield. The Low End Theory is one of the last great albums made in the open air, right before that door swung shut. Nirvana, NWA, Rodney King, the end of free sampling. And underneath all of it, quietly, a record about the bottom of the sound. The Low End Theory was not an overnight smash. It did not need to be. It reached number 45 on the main album chart and number 13 on the R&B and hip-hop chart. Respectable, not an explosion. The album went gold, 500,000 copies, in February of 1992. And then it just kept selling. It went platinum, a full million, in February of 1995, more than 3 years after it came out. That is the signature of a record that becomes part of the furniture of the culture. It did not win the week, it won the decade, and then the one after that. The albums that fill arenas in their first month are often forgotten by the next year. The Low End Theory did the opposite. It got bigger the longer it sat there. Here is how you measure what this record really did. You follow the people who heard it. 3 years later, in 1994, a young rapper from Queens named Nas put out his debut, Illmatic, now considered by many the greatest rap album ever made. One of its most loved songs, One Love, was produced by Q-Tip, the architect of the Low End Theory, helping build the next monument. That is the thread that runs straight into the album this channel started with. But the influence goes much wider than one song. The whole sound of neo-soul, the warm, live, jazzy, bass-heavy music that D'Angelo and Erykah Badu and The Roots made later in the 1990s runs directly through this record. The Low End Theory taught a generation that you could make black music that was relaxed and deep and serious all at once. You can draw a line from this album to Kanye West, to Kendrick Lamar, whose own jazz-soaked records owe it an open debt, to Pharrell, to Outkast, to a producer like Madlib, to a pianist like Robert Glasper. The list is long because the lesson was simple and it traveled. Put the bass in the center, leave room to breathe, treat the past as family. Almost everyone who made thoughtful rap or soul after 1991 was working from notes this album wrote. The Low End Theory, A Tribe Called Quest, released September 24, 1991. Jive Records, 14 tracks, number 45 on the Billboard 200, number 13 R&B and hip hop, gold in 1992, platinum in 1995. One living jazz legend, Ron Carter, on live bass. One future star, Busta Rhymes, launched on the final track, and a sound that would shape the next 30 years of music. In 1991, the people who bought the Low End Theory heard a cool, jazzy, low-slung rap record, a good one, easy to put on. What they were actually holding was the blueprint. The bass moved to the center of hip-hop and never really left. Jazz and rap shook hands in that booth and never fully let go. And two kids from Queens who met before they could read were caught on tape at the absolute peak of their friendship, trading lines, before the years and the road and the illness wore that friendship down. Because the other half of this story is Phife. The kid who almost was not on the album stepped up and became a star on it. He fought diabetes for the rest of his life. He talked about it openly, in ways most people never do. About the steps forward, the slips back, and starting over again. He died in 2016 of complications from the disease at 45 years old. Malik Taylor, the 5-foot assassin, born in 1970, gone in 2016. The kid from Queens who decided on a train to take it serious and made himself heard on the record that taught everyone else where to find the bottom of the sound. This was When It Dropped, A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory, 1991. Subscribe so the next one finds you.